The day Maggie Lane asked me to drive her to meet the couple who planned to adopt her baby, she handed me a yellow folder before she got into my truck. There was a photograph clipped to the front. A smiling man. A woman beside him. A little white house behind them. Maggie tapped the folder with one finger. "If I panic halfway there, don't turn around." I stared at her. "What? I mean it, Luke." She climbed into the passenger seat before I could answer. She was 36 weeks pregnant. Her coat wouldn't close anymore, so she wore it open over a gray sweater. Her dark hair was tied loosely at the back of her neck, and she looked as if she hadn't slept properly in a week. Maybe longer. I stood beside the truck holding that yellow folder. "You're asking me to drive you somewhere you might ask me not to take you?" "Yes, that makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense to me." "That's concerning." Normally Maggie would have smiled. She didn't. Instead, she looked through the windshield and whispered, "Please." So I got in. I placed the folder carefully between us. Then I started the truck. I had no idea that before everything was over, I would remember every detail of that drive. The wet road. The sound of the heater. The way Maggie kept rubbing the side of her thumb over her wedding ring finger even though she had never been married. And the folder sitting between us containing the names of two people who believed that in less than a month, Maggie's daughter would become theirs. My name is Luke Harris. I was 34 then, and I ran Harris Hardware in Cedar Grove, Missouri. The store had belonged to my grandfather. Then my father. Then, whether I was ready or not, it became mine. We sold nails by the pound, lawnmower parts, paint, plumbing supplies, work gloves, fishing line, and several hundred little metal pieces that nobody knew the proper name for until they needed one. The store was on Main Street between a barber shop and a bakery. I lived in a small apartment above it. Most mornings I unlocked the front door at 7. Most nights I locked it again at 6. That had been my life for years. Simple, predictable, safe. I hadn't planned to stay in Cedar Grove forever. At 28, I was engaged to a woman named Caroline. She was smart, funny, restless in a good way. She wanted Kansas City. Then Denver. Maybe Seattle. I wanted those things too, or at least I thought I did. Then my father had a stroke. It wasn't catastrophic, but it changed everything. He could still walk, still talk, still argue about baseball. What he couldn't do was run a hardware store 10 hours a day. I told Caroline I needed to stay for a while. She said she understood. A while became 6 months. 6 months became a year. One evening she sat across from me at our kitchen table and said, "Luke, I love you, but your whole life is built around being needed here." I remember answering, "My dad needs me. I know. So what am I supposed to do?" She rubbed her hands together. "I don't know." A month later, she accepted a job in Denver. I didn't go. We tried long distance for 6 months. Then we stopped pretending. No affair, no screaming. She simply wanted a life that moved. Mine had put down roots. After that, I became careful. I dated sometimes. Nothing serious. I convinced myself that Cedar Grove and Harris Hardware were enough. Then Maggie came home. I had known Maggie nearly my whole life because her older brother Jason had been my best friend since 2nd grade. Jason and I played baseball together, got detention together, bought our first cars from the same terrible used car lot. Maggie was 4 years younger. For most of our childhood, she was simply Jason's little sister, who followed us around and reported everything we did to their mother. Then she grew up. That complicated things. By the time Maggie was 22, I had started noticing her in ways a man should probably not notice his best friend's sister. I dealt with that by doing nothing. Maggie moved to St. Louis after college. She worked in event planning, then hotel management. We saw each other on Christmas sometimes, weddings, family cookouts, never enough for anything to begin. Then she came back to Cedar Grove at 30, and pregnant. Jason told me first. We were standing behind the hardware store unloading bags of grass seed when he said, "Maggie's moving home." I handed him another bag. Good, she's pregnant. I nearly dropped the next one. Oh yeah, is she okay? Jason shrugged. I don't know. What about the father? They're not together. I waited. Jason had nothing more to offer. That's all you know? That's all she told me. Maggie arrived 4 days later. She moved into the small cottage that had belonged to her grandmother. It had been empty for almost 2 years. The first time I saw her, she walked into my hardware store carrying a broken cabinet hinge. She put it on the counter. Tell me you still sell these. I stared at her for a second too long. She raised an eyebrow. Luke? Sorry, I looked down at the hinge. Yeah, back wall. Section 12. You know exactly where one hinge is? I know where everything is. That's either impressive or deeply sad. There she is. Who? The reason Jason used to lock his bedroom door. She smiled. That smile had not changed. I walked her toward the hardware aisle. Only then did I allow myself to notice her pregnancy properly. She was about 7 months along. She caught me looking. You're allowed to acknowledge it. I know. You look terrified. I'm deciding what question won't get me thrown out of my own store. She laughed. Girl, what? It's a girl. Oh, I smiled. Congratulations, something happened to her expression. It lasted less than a second. Then she said, thank you. That should have been my first clue. A few days later, she called because the kitchen sink at the cottage was leaking. You sell plumbing parts, she said. Yes, so logically you know plumbing. No, Luke, I sell hammers too. That doesn't make me a carpenter. You fixed your dad's bathroom. You remember that? Jason complained about losing running water for 3 days. That was one mistake. Please? I went. The sink took 20 minutes. I stayed 2 hours. The cottage was old but warm. Small rooms. Wide wooden trim. A deep front porch. Her grandmother had painted the kitchen cabinets pale green sometime in the 70s. And Maggie refused to change them. They're ugly, I told her. They have history. They have lead paint. That too. While I worked, Maggie sat at the kitchen table drinking tea. We talked about the town. My father. Jason, St. Louis, everything except the baby's father. I didn't ask. When I finished, Maggie said, How much? Nothing, Luke. It took 20 minutes. You were here 2 hours. Most of that was you insulting my profession. That should cost extra. I laughed. Before leaving, I noticed there was no nursery. The cottage had a second bedroom. The door stood open. Inside was an empty room. No crib, no changing table, no baby clothes. Nothing. It seemed strange for a woman entering her 3rd trimester. But it wasn't my business. So I went home. A week later, Maggie came into the store for paint. What room? I asked. Second bedroom. I reached for a color chart. Okay, you thinking warm neutral? Maybe something light? White, just white? Just white. I looked at her. People usually have more opinions than that. I'm selling the cottage. That surprised me. You just moved back. I know. Where are you going? I'm not sure. Maggie. She took the paint card from my hand. You asked too many questions. You came into a hardware store. Questions are part of the experience. She didn't smile. That was when I knew something bigger was happening. Still, I didn't know what. Not until the day she handed me the yellow folder. The couple in the photograph were named Ben and Rachel Palmer. They lived outside Columbia. Ben taught history at a middle school. Rachel worked as a speech therapist. They had been married 11 years. They had tried to have children for 7. 3 failed fertility treatments. 1 miscarriage. Then they decided to adopt. Maggie had found them through an agency in St. Louis. The drive from Cedar Grove took almost 2 hours. For the first 30 minutes, we barely spoke. Then I asked, how many times have you met them? 3. You like them? Yes. You trust them? Yes. Then why did you need me to drive? She stared through the passenger window. My car makes a strange sound. Maggie, I'm serious. You drove it to my store yesterday. The sound started later. I waited. Finally, she sighed. I didn't want Jason. Why? He turns everything into a family meeting. True. My dad asks whether I've reviewed every legal document. Also true. And my mother cries. Definitely true. She looked at me. You don't do any of those things. What do I do? You stay quiet until I'm ready. I gripped the steering wheel. That's either a compliment or an accusation. Compliment, we drove another mile. Then she said, his name was Derek. I knew immediately who she meant. The father? She nodded. We dated a little over a year. Serious? I thought so. What happened? I got pregnant. My jaw tightened. And? He wasn't ready. That phrase covers a lot. He wanted me to consider other options. I understood. You didn't. No, so he left? Not immediately. She looked down at her hands. We tried to make it work. For about 2 months, what changed? Everything became an argument. She swallowed. Money. Housing. His career. My job. Where we'd live. Whether we should marry. I glanced at her. Did you want to? Marry him? Yeah, no, that surprised me. I realized we were discussing marriage because we were scared, not because we should be married. That's probably a good thing to realize before a wedding. Exactly. What about the baby? She was quiet. Derek said he didn't think either of us could give her what she deserved. And you agreed at the time. The words stayed between us. At the time, she looked toward the yellow folder. I've chosen Ben and Rachel. I nodded slowly. That didn't answer me. Her jaw tightened. Luke. Okay, I stopped. She exhaled. Thank you. When we reached the Palmer's house, I understood why Maggie had chosen them. Their home sat on a quiet street. There was a swing hanging from a maple tree in the front yard. Shoes by the door. Family photographs everywhere. Rachel hugged Maggie the moment she entered. Not cautiously. Not formally. Like they already cared about each other. Ben shook my hand. You're Luke. I looked at Maggie. She shrugged. I mentioned you. That's worrying. Ben smiled. Rachel laughed. We had lunch. I mostly listened. The Palmers had prepared a bedroom but kept the door closed unless Maggie wanted to see it. Rachel explained their plan for an open adoption. They wanted Maggie involved. Photographs, visits if she wanted, letters, whatever level of contact felt healthy. Nothing about them felt wrong. That made the ache in my chest harder to understand. After lunch, Rachel asked Maggie privately if she wanted to see the nursery. Maggie hesitated, then nodded. I stayed downstairs with Ben. He was a decent man. That almost annoyed me. He talked about his students, his wife, the Little League team he coached. Finally, he glanced toward the staircase. You've known Maggie a long time? Most of my life. She talks about you. I tried to sound casual. Does she? She said you're the person in town who never tells her what she's supposed to feel. I looked toward the stairs. I'm not sure anybody can do that. Ben nodded. That's what I told her. A few minutes later, Maggie returned. Her face was composed. Too composed. Rachel had tears in her eyes. We said goodbye. Back in the truck, Maggie buckled her seatbelt and said, Drive. I did. We made it 15 minutes. Then she said, Pull over. I found a gravel turnout. Maggie got out. I followed. She walked several yards away from the truck. Then she started crying. Not polite tears. Not the kind you wipe away before anyone sees. Her whole body shook. I stood a few feet behind her. I didn't touch her. After a while she said, They painted it yellow. What? The nursery. I wait. My mother painted my room yellow when she was pregnant with me. Her voice broke. I never told Rachel that. I stepped closer. Maggie, she had these little books on the shelf, Another Breath, and a wooden rabbit beside the crib. She wiped her face. It was perfect. That doesn't mean this is easy. It's supposed to make it easier. Who told you that? She turned toward me. Everyone. I shook my head. Good people can still be part of a painful choice. She covered her face again. I hate you. I know. No. I really hate you. Because? Because you say things I've been trying not to think. I nodded. Sorry, she lowered her hands. Don't be. We stood beside the road until she could breathe normally again. Then we went home. After that day, something between Maggie and me changed. Not dramatically. Slowly, she started coming into the store around closing. Sometimes she needed something. Usually she didn't. I began stopping by the cottage after work. There was always a job. A sticking window. Loose porch board. Closet shelf. Door that wouldn't latch. One evening, I found her sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by paperwork. What happened? She held up a document. I've read this paragraph 6 times. Want help? You understand adoption law? No, then no. I sat beside her anyway. She leaned her head back against a cabinet. I'm tired. I can see that. Do I look terrible? I'm not answering. Coward. You're 8 months pregnant and holding legal papers. This is survival. She smiled. I made grilled cheese. She ate 2 sandwiches. Then half of mine. You have your own. Yours looked better. They came from the same pan. Still, that became our routine. Small things. Dinner, repairs, tea, once. I found her asleep on the couch with an adoption book open across her chest. I covered her with a blanket. As I turned away, she whispered, Luke? You awake? Barely what? She opened her eyes. Would you think less of me? For what? She touched her stomach. You know. No. You answered fast. Because the answer is easy. She studied me. Even if I regret it? That doesn't make you bad. What if I keep her and regret that? That doesn't make you bad either. Maggie sat up slowly. How are you so calm about this? I'm not the one deciding. That's exactly why. I understood. People outside a decision could afford confidence. The person inside it had to live with every consequence. I sat in the chair across from her. Can I ask something? Maybe. Do you want to place her for adoption? Maggie closed her eyes. That's not fair. Why? Because wanting isn't the only thing that matters. I didn't say it was. She opened her eyes. I want a lot of things I can't build a life around. Like? To stay home the first year. Okay. To not work 60-hour weeks. Okay. To have enough money that I don't panic when the furnace breaks. Reasonable. To give her 2 parents who wanted her before she existed. That one hit differently. I leaned forward. Maggie, being unmarried doesn't mean nobody wants your daughter. That isn't what I meant. I know. She looked away. I changed the subject. I had pushed far enough. A week later, we went to a town Christmas market. Maggie complained that it was too early for Christmas music, then spent $40 on ornaments. At one booth, an older woman sold knitted baby hats. Maggie picked up a tiny cream-colored one. She held it carefully. The woman smiled. How old is your little one? Maggie froze. I stepped closer. Not here yet. Oh, the woman smiled warmly at Maggie. First? Maggie nodded. December, best Christmas gift there is. Maggie put the hat down immediately. We walked away. 10 minutes later, I returned alone and bought it. I didn't know why. I hid it in my truck's glove compartment. The secret I discovered next was smaller than the adoption. But it told me more. I was helping Maggie move a bookshelf when I found a cardboard box in the closet. The bottom split. Everything fell out. Baby clothes. Not generic ones meant for the Palmers. These were things Maggie had chosen. A yellow sleeper. 3 pairs of socks. A blanket with small blue flowers. The cream-colored hat from the Christmas market. I stared at it. Maggie went pale. You bought one too? She grabbed the hat. When? After you walked away. So did I. Neither of us spoke. Then I noticed a folded paper beneath the clothes. Baby names. Maggie snatched it up. You didn't see that. I didn't read it. Good, she crouched to gather the clothes. I helped. Why are these hidden? Because I'm not keeping them. Then why buy them? Luke. Okay. She stopped packing. Her hands rested on the blanket. I wanted to know what it felt like. What? To buy something for her. My throat tightened. So I bought a few things. She folded the sleeper carefully. Then I put them away. Why? Because I started imagining her wearing them. I had no answer. Maggie looked at me. That's exactly what I can't afford to do. The following week, Jason found out how much time I had been spending with her. He came into the hardware store at 5:30. He waited until the last customer left. Then he locked the front door himself. That's usually my job. We need to talk. Those words never improve a day. He stood beside the paint counter. You and Maggie. I kept organizing receipts. What about us? Don't. Don't what? You know what? I looked at him. Jason's face wasn't angry. That worried me more. You like her. She's your sister. Not an answer. I set the receipts down. Yes. He closed his eyes briefly. Luke, what? She's pregnant. I noticed. She is placing that child with a family. I know. She is emotional. I know. She doesn't need you deciding this is your chance to finally act on whatever thing you've been carrying since your 20s. My chest tightened. That's not what I'm doing. Are you sure? Yes, because she talks about you constantly. I didn't know what to say to that. Jason continued. She trusts you. I'd never use that. I know. His voice softened. That's why I'm talking instead of hitting you with a shovel. Appreciate it. He didn't smile. Do you remember what things were like after Dad left? I did. Jason and Maggie's father had left when Maggie was 11. He moved to Texas, sent money irregularly, visited even less. Their mother, Linda, worked at the county office during the day and cleaned houses on weekends. I remember. Maggie doesn't. What do you mean? She remembers Mom being tired. Jason looked down. She doesn't remember the notices on the kitchen counter. I went still. Electric shut-off notices. Mortgage notices. I was 16. I understood. He rubbed his jaw. I remember Mom crying because Maggie needed braces and we didn't have the money. His eyes came back to mine. I don't want my sister living like that. She isn't your mother. I know, things are different. Maybe. He leaned against the counter. But if Maggie keeps this baby because she thinks you're going to build some instant family around her, and then 6 months from now you realize you don't want diapers, daycare, and somebody else's child. Stop. Jason went silent. I kept my voice low. I would never call that baby somebody else's child in front of Maggie. I didn't mean it like that. I know what you meant. I took a breath. And I know why you're scared. Jason's face softened, but don't confuse being scared for her with knowing what's best for her. He looked toward the window. After a long pause, he nodded. Fair, then he pointed at me. But if you hurt her, our 30-year friendship becomes negotiable. Also fair. He left. His warning bothered me because part of it was true. I was falling in love with Maggie. And I had not told her, not because I was afraid she'd reject me. Because I was afraid she wouldn't. She was vulnerable. Lonely, scared. What if she reached for me because I happened to be standing nearby? What if my feelings changed a decision that needed to belong entirely to her? So I pulled back. Not completely, but enough that Maggie noticed. I stopped coming by every evening, stopped inventing reasons to bring dinner, stopped texting to ask if she needed anything. 3 days passed. On the 4th night, she walked into my store 10 minutes before closing. She stood at the counter. You're avoiding me. No, you're bad at lying. I've been busy. With what? I looked around. Hardware. She stared at me. Did Jason talk to you? That surprised me. Why? Because he has the emotional subtlety of a truck alarm. I said nothing. Maggie's shoulders dropped. He did. He's worried. So am I. He loves you. That doesn't mean he gets to manage me. I told him that. Then why are you avoiding me? I looked down at the counter. Because I don't want to make your decision harder. Her expression changed. You think you're that important? I looked up. She was trying to joke. It didn't land. Maggie, I've already chosen. Her hand moved to her stomach. Ben and Rachel. I know. Then stop treating me like I'm one conversation away from changing my mind. I swallowed. What if you are? She stared at me. The room became very quiet. Finally, she whispered, that's exactly why I need you to stop. I understood. It hurt anyway. Okay. She walked out. For the next 2 weeks, I gave Maggie what she asked for. Space. I still answered when she called. Still fixed a broken porch light. Still drove her mother to pick up medication when Maggie was too tired. But I stopped living half my life in her kitchen. Then Derek came back. I had never met him before. He showed up at Maggie's cottage on a Saturday afternoon. I happened to be there because I was dropping off a new porch rail. He pulled into the driveway in a dark SUV, tall, clean-cut. Nervous, Maggie saw him through the window. Every bit of color left her face. What is he doing here? Derek? She nodded. Want me to go? No, that answer came quickly. So I stayed. Derek knocked. Maggie opened the door. Hi. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets. Hi, then he saw me. Who's this? Maggie's voice changed. Luke, I offered my hand. Luke Harris. Derek shook it. I've heard the name. I didn't know if that was good. He entered. We sat in the living room. I felt like I was occupying a chair in somebody else's conversation. Eventually Derek said, the agency called me. Maggie frowned. Why? There are final forms they still need. I thought everything was done. So did I. His eyes dropped toward her stomach. When are you due? Thursday, he nodded. That soon. Maggie's jaw tightened. You knew the date. I know. He looked ashamed. I just haven't been good at any of this. For the first time, I saw him less as the man who abandoned a pregnant woman and more as a frightened 30-year-old who had run because he had no idea how to stay. That didn't excuse anything. But it changed the shape. Derek looked at me again. Are you two together? No, Maggie and I said at the same time. Too fast. Derek noticed. He leaned forward. Maggie, I need to ask you something. What? Are you still doing the adoption? She stared at him. Yes, okay, something in his shoulders loosened. Maggie saw it. Her face hardened. Relieved? No, you look relieved. I need to know what we're doing. We? Derek rubbed his hands together. I signed because we agreed adoption was best. You signed because you didn't want a parent. He flinched. That's not completely fair, isn't it? I didn't grow up with a father. Neither of us spoke. Derek continued. My dad came and went whenever he felt guilty. His voice tightened. Birthday present 1 year. Gone for 2. Shows up at Christmas. Promises everything. Gone again. He looked at Maggie. I don't want to become that man. Then don't. It isn't that simple. Why? Because I don't know if I can be what a child needs. Maggie's voice softened despite herself. So your answer is to never try? My answer is to let 2 people who have spent years wanting a child raise her. There was no cruelty in it. Just fear. And maybe logic. That was what made the whole situation unbearable. Derek signed the remaining papers. Before he left, he stopped beside Maggie. I am sorry. She looked away. I know. I mean it. I know. He nodded. Then he left. Maggie stood at the window watching his car disappear. I stayed quiet. Finally, she said, everyone has a reason. What? Derek has a reason. She counted softly with her fingers. Jason has a reason. Mom has a reason. Ben and Rachel have a reason. She looked at me. I have a reason. You don't sound convinced. I don't have to feel convinced. Maybe not. I only have to make the best decision. Those aren't always different things. She turned away. Please don't. I stopped. She was exhausted. So I left. Maggie's water broke 2 nights later. At 1:17 in the morning. Jason called me. Hospital, I sat straight up. What happened? Maggie's in labor. I'll be there. I dressed in the dark. 10 minutes later, I was driving through freezing rain towards Cedar Grove Memorial. Maggie labored for 13 hours. I wasn't in the delivery room. Her mother was. I stayed with Jason. We drank terrible coffee. We walked the hallway. We said nothing useful. At 2:30 that afternoon, Jason came out. His eyes were wet. Girl, I stood. She okay? Both good. My whole body loosened. What did she name her? Jason swallowed. Clara. I knew that name. It had been written on the paper. I had accidentally seen the edge of beneath Maggie's baby clothes. The name she had chosen even though she'd told herself she wasn't keeping anything. Clara Lane. A nurse allowed me into the room later. Maggie looked exhausted. Her hair was damp. Her eyes were swollen. And in her arms was the smallest person I had ever seen. Clara had dark hair, a wrinkled little forehead, one fist near her cheek. Maggie looked at me. Hi, I couldn't speak properly. Hi, she smiled. Want to meet her? I stepped closer. This is Clara. She's beautiful. I know. Maggie's face changed when she looked down at the baby. It wasn't uncertainty. That was the problem. It was love. Immediate, terrifying, complete. She asked me to hold Clara. I almost said no. Then I sat beside the bed. Maggie placed her in my arms. Clara weighed almost nothing. Her eyes stayed closed. Her mouth moved slightly. One hand opened against my shirt. My chest hurt. Luke? I realized Maggie was watching me. Yeah? You okay? Not really. She laughed softly. Me neither. Ben and Rachel arrived that evening. I saw them before Maggie did. Rachel carried the same yellow folder. Only now it was thicker. Ben carried a baby bag. Neither looked excited. They looked terrified. Rachel hugged me in the hallway. How is she? Good, and Maggie? I looked through the small window in the door. She needs you to be gentle. Rachel's eyes filled immediately. We will be. That night, the hospital arranged for Ben and Rachel to spend time with Clara while Maggie rested. I went home around midnight. I did not sleep. At 7 the next morning, I opened the hardware store because I didn't know what else to do. I stood behind the counter selling furnace filters while the woman I loved prepared to hand her daughter to someone else. Around 10, Jason came in. You need to go to the hospital. I looked up. What? Maggie's asking for you. My heart started pounding. Why? I don't know. Where are Ben and Rachel? There. I grabbed my coat. Jason caught my arm. Luke, I turned. His eyes were tired. I was wrong about one thing. What? She isn't looking at you because she's scared. He let go of my arm. She looks at you because she trusts you. I didn't answer. Don't tell her what to choose. I won't. But don't hide what you feel either. That surprised me. What happened to protecting your sister? He smiled sadly. Maybe I'm finally letting her protect herself. I drove to the hospital. Fast, but not reckless. I told myself I would not interfere, would not make promises, would not turn myself into an answer simply because Maggie was afraid. When I reached her room, the door was partly open. The social worker was there. So were Ben and Rachel. Linda stood near the window. Jason arrived behind me. Maggie sat on the bed holding Clara. Papers rested on the table beside her. Everyone looked as if they'd been crying. Maggie saw me. Her face folded with relief. That nearly destroyed every careful thought in my head. You came. Of course. Rachel stood. We can step out. Maggie shook her head. No. She looked at everyone. I can't keep making different versions of this decision depending on who's in the room. Nobody argued. I stayed near the door. Maggie looked down at Clara. They're supposed to leave with her this afternoon. My throat tightened. I know, I've known that for 5 months. I nodded. I made the plan. I know. I chose them. They're good people. Rachel cried quietly. Maggie looked at her. They are. Then back at me. So why does it feel like I'm doing something wrong? I stepped closer. I don't think you're doing something wrong. Then why are you looking at me like that? I didn't know how I was looking at her. Like what? Like you're trying not to say something. That was true. I looked toward Clara. Then Maggie. I promised myself I wouldn't make this decision about me. It isn't. I know, but you're part of my life. Her voice cracked. So say whatever you've been refusing to say. The room became quiet. I could hear Clara making tiny breathing noises. I took another step. I love you. Maggie's mouth opened slightly. I continued before fear could stop me. I probably should have told you years ago. Jason rubbed his forehead. Seriously? Even Maggie laughed through her tears. I looked at him, not helping. Sorry, I turned back to her. I loved you before St. Louis. Maggie's eyes filled. Luke, I didn't say anything because you were Jason's sister. Then I was with Caroline. Then you left. I took a breath. And now I love the woman you are, not some memory of you. She looked down. I love how stubborn you are. I am not. You absolutely are. A faint smile. I love your terrible green kitchen. They're historic cabinets. Sure, a few people laughed softly. Then my voice became harder to control. And I already love Clara. Maggie's eyes closed. I kept going. I know she's not mine. She isn't something I get to claim because I have feelings for you. I know Ben and Rachel love her too. Ben looked down. And I know you chose adoption because you wanted her safe. My throat tightened. But if even one part of you is signing those papers because you believe the only alternative is raising your daughter by yourself, I stopped. Maggie looked at me. I had spent weeks trying to avoid these words. Now they were the only ones that mattered. You don't have to do this alone. Maggie's face broke. She pulled Clara closer and started crying. I went to her, not touching her until she reached for me. Then her hand grabbed mine. I can't ask you for that. You didn't. You don't know what you're promising. Then don't treat it like a promise. She looked confused. I crouched beside the bed. Treat it like information. What? You're making a decision. I squeezed her hand. You deserve all the information. My voice shook. One piece of that information is that there is a man standing here who loves you and is willing to build a life with you. Tears ran down her face. I can't guarantee I'll be perfect. Good, she whispered. I hate perfect people. I'll probably panic the first time she gets sick. You will. I know nothing about diapers. That can be learned. I don't know how we'd handle daycare. Neither do I. I don't even have room for a crib in my apartment. That made Maggie laugh. Your apartment barely has room for you. Exactly, I smiled through the ache in my chest. I am not giving you a fantasy. I looked at the papers. I'm giving you another possible life. Maggie covered her eyes. I don't know what to do. Rachel stood. She walked slowly toward the bed. I moved aside. Rachel touched Maggie's arm. Maggie looked up. Rachel was crying now. You told me something during our second meeting. What? You said the one thing you needed from us was honesty. Maggie nodded. So I'm going to be honest. Rachel looked at Clara. I want this baby. Her voice broke. So badly that I don't know how I'm going to walk out of here if you decide to parent her. Ben put a hand on Rachel's shoulder. Rachel continued. But I also don't want to become a mother because another woman believes she wasn't allowed to be one. Maggie sobbed. Rachel. No. Rachel shook her head. You don't owe us your daughter because we're good people. Silence. You don't owe us your daughter because we painted a nursery. More tears. And you don't owe us your daughter because you made a plan before you met her. Ben turned away and wiped his eyes. Rachel leaned closer. If you believe adoption is right, we will love her completely. She swallowed. But if you want to raise her, Maggie, then I need you to say that too. Maggie looked around the room, at her mother, Jason, Ben, Rachel, me. Finally, she looked at Clara. For almost a minute, she said nothing. Then she whispered, I want my daughter. Rachel closed her eyes. Ben held her. Nobody celebrated. That would have been cruel. There was relief, grief, love, loss, all in the same room. The adoption papers stayed unsigned. Ben and Rachel asked for time alone before leaving. Maggie agreed. Later, she wrote them a letter. They wrote back several months after that. Their words were kind. Painful, but kind. About a year later, the Palmers were matched with another expectant mother. That adoption went through. They sent Maggie a Christmas card with a photograph of their son. She kept it on the refrigerator. Clara came home with Maggie 2 days after she was born. Not to my apartment. Not because we suddenly became a perfect family. She went home to the cottage. I carried the car seat inside. Jason carried 3 bags that somehow contained everything a 7-pound baby apparently required. Linda arrived with enough food to feed the entire street. I had one gift. The cream-colored hat. Maggie stared when I pulled it from my coat pocket. You bought it. You did too. She smiled. We're idiots. Probably we put mine on Clara. It was too big. It slid over one eye. Maggie laughed so hard she woke her. Then Clara screamed. We stopped laughing. What do we do? Maggie stared at me. Why are you asking me? You're the mother. I've been one for 48 hours. Fair point. That was how parenting started. Confusion, very little sleep. Too many opinions, and more love than I knew where to put. I didn't move into the cottage. Not for almost a year. That was Maggie's decision too. She needed to know she was choosing me because she loved me, not because she needed help. I needed the same certainty. So I went home at night sometimes. Other nights I slept on the couch after Clara had been awake for 4 straight hours. I learned to make bottles, change diapers, warm milk without overheating it, install a car seat after watching the same instruction video 6 times. Maggie learned that asking for help did not mean failing. That was harder for her. One night, about 6 weeks after Clara came home, I arrived after closing the store. Maggie was crying in the kitchen. Clara was crying too. I put down the grocery bag. What happened? I don't know. Okay, I fed her. Maggie wiped her face. I changed her. Okay, she won't sleep. I took Clara. Her crying continued. Maggie folded her arms tightly. I'm terrible at this. No, you can't know that. I know terrible mothers probably don't cry because they're worried they're terrible mothers. That sentence barely makes sense. I'm tired too. She laughed weakly. I walked Clara around the kitchen. 10 minutes later, she finally settled. Maggie sat at the table. I almost called my mom. Why didn't you? I should be able to handle one baby. I looked at her. Why? Because she's mine. That doesn't mean you stop being human. She looked down. I keep thinking about Rachel. I know. What if she would have been better at this? Probably some things. Maggie's eyes snapped up. I shrugged. She's a speech therapist. She probably knows more about child development than either of us. That is not comforting. But you know something she doesn't. What? Clara. I looked down at the sleeping baby. You know the sound she makes right before she cries. Maggie's expression softened. You know she hates being cold. A small smile. You know she calms down when you hum that same terrible song. It's not terrible. It has 3 notes. She likes it. Exactly, I handed Clara back to her. You're her mother. Maggie held her close. You're learning each other. She leaned her head against my shoulder. So are we. Yeah, ordinary life arrived slowly. Maggie started working part-time from home, doing event coordination. I spent mornings at the hardware store, lunch at the cottage whenever I could. Clara became a regular customer before she could walk. I kept a playpen behind the counter. Old men buying plumbing parts would stop and make faces at her. She became more popular than I was. One afternoon, Jason came in and found me carrying Clara against my chest while ringing up a customer. He waited until the customer left. This is disturbing. What? You look domestic. I've always been domestic. You once ate canned chili cold because you didn't want to wash a pot. That was efficient. He looked at Clara. She grabbed his finger. Jason's expression melted instantly. Then he looked at me. You staying? The question wasn't about the store. I knew that. Yes, he nodded. Good, that's it? That's it. No shovel? Still available. We smiled. Then he hugged me. Briefly hard, Maggie and I did not have some perfect romance afterward. We argued. A lot, usually about stupid things. I worked too much. She worried too much. I hated the way she stacked plates. She hated the way I left my boots beside the front door. Once we had a 40-minute disagreement about whether Clara needed another blanket. Nobody won. That was the point. We were building a life instead of escaping into one. When Clara was 10 months old, Maggie and I sat on the front porch after putting her to bed. Summer insects buzzed around the porch light. Maggie rested her bare feet on the railing. I've been thinking. Dangerous, she nudged my leg. I'm serious. Okay, she looked toward the dark yard. Do you ever wish I'd made a different choice? I understood what she was really asking. Adoption? She nodded. No, you answered too quickly. Because I've had 10 months to think about it. What if you weren't here? That doesn't matter. It matters to me. I leaned back. If I wasn't here, would it be harder? Yes, would you still love Clara? Of course. Would your family help? Yes, would you figure things out? She hesitated. Yes, then stop treating me like the reason you became her mother. Maggie's eyes filled. I was scared. I know. You made it possible to imagine keeping her. Maybe. I took her hand. But you chose her. She squeezed my fingers. And I choose you. That was the first time she said it that way. Not I love you. She had said that months earlier. I choose you. For Maggie, those words meant more. The following spring, I proposed. Not at a restaurant. Not on a holiday. In the hardware store. It was raining outside. Maggie had brought Clara in because I had forgotten my lunch. Clara was standing unsteadily beside a display of garden hoses. Maggie put the lunch bag on the counter. You'd starve without me. I survived 34 years. Barely I came around the counter. I have something. What? I reached into the old cash drawer. Maggie's eyes widened. Luke, I knelt. No, I paused. No? No. I mean, she started laughing. Not no. That's an important distinction. Customers near the paint aisle had started watching. Maggie covered her face. You're doing this here? This place has been involved in every major decision of my adult life. That is deeply unromantic. Good, I held out the ring. You already know I love you. She nodded. You know I love Clara. Another nod. You know I'm going to complain about those kitchen cabinets until somebody removes them. Never happening. Understood. I smiled. I don't want a dramatic life with you. Her eyes filled. I want groceries. She laughed. School pickups. Another breath. Broken water heaters. Luke. Christmas mornings. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I want the ordinary stuff for as many years as we get. I held up the ring. Marry me? Maggie said yes. Then Clara knocked over a bucket of paint rollers. Perfect timing. We married 6 months later in Linda's backyard. Ben and Rachel sent a card. That surprised us. Inside, Rachel had written one sentence. We hope Clara grows up knowing how deeply she was wanted. Maggie cried when she read it. So did I. Years passed. Clara started kindergarten. then first grade. She inherited Maggie's stubbornness and, somehow, my habit of organizing screws by size. When she was 6, she asked why there were 2 cream-colored baby hats in a box in her closet. Maggie and I had always agreed she would know her story. No secrets, just information given at the right age. So Maggie sat beside her. One was mine. Clara held up the other. And this? Luke bought that one. By then she called me Dad. She looked at me. Why? I shrugged. I liked it. For me? Yes, but you didn't know I was going to live with you. No. She considered that carefully. So you bought me a hat before you were my dad? Apparently Clara smiled. That's weird. Maggie laughed. It was. Clara put both hats on her head at once and ran through the house. We watched her disappear down the hallway. Maggie leaned against me. You kept hope in the glove compartment. I didn't know what else to do with it. She took my hand. The yellow adoption folder is still in our house too. Maggie kept it. Not because she regrets the decision she made. And not because she wants Clara carrying the weight of a choice made before she was born. She kept it because the folder is part of our family story. It reminds us that love can exist on both sides of an impossible decision. It reminds us of Ben and Rachel. It reminds us of Derek, who eventually sent Clara a letter explaining that his absence came from fear, not from anything she had done. Most of all, it reminds us how close Maggie came to building her whole future around the belief that needing help meant she wasn't ready to be a mother. She knows better now. So do I. People sometimes tell our story as if I walked into a hospital and changed Maggie's mind. That's not what happened. I didn't save her. I didn't rescue Clara. And I certainly didn't defeat adoption. Adoption gave the Palmers the son they love. It remains a beautiful choice for families who know it is right for them. Maggie simply discovered that her choice had been built partly on a lie she was telling herself. That she had only 2 options. Give Clara a good family. Or struggle completely alone. Once she realized there was another possibility, she allowed herself to ask what she actually wanted. And then, she chose. Today there are 4 pairs of shoes beside our front door, because Maggie and I eventually had a son named Henry. The green kitchen cabinets are still there. I lost that battle permanently. Clara does homework at the same table where Maggie once spread out adoption papers. Henry leaves toy trucks under every chair. And every December, Maggie hangs one tiny cream-colored baby hat on the Christmas tree. 3 things live in this house now that neither of us expected back then. Noise, mess, and belonging. I used to think being needed was the reason I stayed in Cedar Grove. Caroline had even said it once. Maybe she was partly right. But I eventually learned the difference between being needed and being chosen. Maggie did not need me to become Clara's mother. She chose motherhood. She chose me later. And every morning when I walk downstairs, step over somebody's shoes, and find my family arguing about breakfast, I make the same choice again.